Welcome to Todd Talk. Today we're going to talk about Las Vegas.
Todd Talk is brought to you by Greg's Casino, the loosest slots on the strip.
Vegas is a really weird and interesting place. I've been probably half a dozen times in my lifetime, and every time I go, it's a little bit of a different experience. It's really bizarre in that you can find these really high class and opulent hotels and shops right next to these really cheesy and trashy things. You'll have like a Louis Vuitton flagship store, and then like 2 blocks away, you'll have like 99-cent margaritas. The thing that's great about Vegas is it kind of has something for everyone. The thing that Vegas is famous for, of course, is gambling. There's casinos everywhere, and you can kind of do whatever you want. You can walk around with a drink, and there's not a lot of rules. I mean, there are rules, but compared to a lot of places, it's just really different and kind of bohemian feeling. When I was younger, of course, there's bars everywhere and, lots of different places to hang out and party and all that, and that was very fun. Once I got a little older and I went with friends, of course, there's really great entertainment in Vegas. Seems like everybody is there at any given time. And as I've gotten even older, I really appreciate some of the food and entertainment options as far as like art and immersive exhibits, things like that. It's world class. The other thing that's fascinating is it changes so much. Things that seemed like they were going to be there forever vanish. They have famously imploded hotels and stuff like that. And this very iconic strip is constantly evolving. There are hotels that I visited that are just no longer there. There's hotels from pictures of Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack and stuff like that that just aren't there. And everybody knows about the Strip, which is a, pretty long street full of hotels and casinos and things like that. But there's also Fremont Street, downtown Las Vegas, Area 15, and some other new things that have popped up. Every time I've been to Vegas, I've usually eaten pretty well. I usually check out some pretty cool restaurants, cocktail bars, things like that. I saw a show called Purple Rain a few years back that was a Prince impersonator that is just fantastic. About 5 years ago when I went to Omega Mart at Area 15, and that is a really, really cool exhibit if you like Meow Wolf and their sort of art. And just last month, I went again. I found a really good Black Friday deal where my whole hotel flight and all of that was about $300 for like 3 nights. I ended up staying at the Flamingo Hotel, which is right in the middle of everything. It's not super fancy, but it's very historic and central to pretty much everywhere you want to go. When I travel, I don't often rent a car. I will grab an Uber from the airport out to the hotel, and then otherwise I just walk. And I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. There was one day I walked 12 miles according to my watch. So I really like that. I like being on the ground and being amongst it and seeing the place. When I was in New York or New Orleans, I probably went some places that a lot of people wouldn't have felt comfortable, but I really like to see what it is like to be there. But like I said, this last time I went, I was pretty central to all of the places that I was going to go and to visit, and I did a couple of really cool things. If you just want to see the highlights, I'll leave a quick video up here that you can check out that just shows you in just a couple of minutes my whole trip. But if you want to hear some of the details, stick around. So when I arrived, I checked into my hotel and I had dinner that night at Gordon Ramsay Burger. Gordon Ramsay Burger is probably one of the most accessible Gordon Ramsay dining experiences. He has several restaurants on the strip, and some of them are a little pricey. Gordon Ramsay Burger, it's still, like $25 for a hamburger, but it's a really great hamburger, good cocktails, and I had a good time. One thing I like about the Flamingo is it's right next door to the Link Hotel, and between them, there's a little alleyway that is kind of lined with restaurants and shops. At the end of the alleyway is where the big Ferris wheel is. And among those shops and restaurants, there's a bar that does good margaritas, chips and salsa. It's a great place to end up at night before you go to bed. My first full day, I just went for a walk. Actually got up at a reasonable hour and just checked things out. So much changes. For example, there were 2 new hotels that weren't there the last time I went. And so I just popped my head in, saw what they were all about. went down and checked out the Fontainebleau and the Hilton Resorts World. Fontainebleau is very, very fancy, very cool. Lots of interesting little art things. There was this car that's just sitting on its nose when you walk in that's very cool looking. And then there's an exhibit that sort of mimics the tides from around the world, and it tells you what it is emulating. And it's this sort of kinetic art piece. It was a really neat thing to put in your entryway. And the hotel is just real upscale feeling. Resorts World was a little bit more shopping focused. Again, lots of art, and it was really nice, but lots of shops, lots of restaurants, things like that on the ground floor. A couple things that weren't there that were there last time was the Tropicana Hotel. I popped in there and had drinks and dinner with some friends last time we were there, and that hotel has been demolished. It's where they're going to build their new stadium. The other hotel that is closed down is the Mirage. Feels like it's been there forever. It's all kind of walled off, and they're doing a lot of construction to make it turn into the new Hard Rock Hotel. There used to be a Hard Rock Hotel off strip just a little bit. I remember going there and having breakfast one time because they did a Captain Crunch coated French toast for breakfast, and that was real fun. But several years ago, they shut the property down, and I think they may have even demolished it. But yeah, apparently they're reopening on the strip. I spent my day noodling around and checking out different shops, things like that. The big event for the day is I got to go to the Sphere. I think a lot of us have seen pictures or videos of the Sphere, and it is a venue. It's very new in Las Vegas. They do music acts, they show movies, things like that. And I was very, very excited to check it out. From many, many places on the strip, you can see it. It's a big, big building, and it is covered in a screen. And so all day long, it is showing images and things like that. Some of them are advertisements. Some of them are just weird and funny things like emoji faces or a big eyeball, things like that. At night, it's very, very surreal because it is just this giant half dome, this perfect half circle that is just showing imagery. And so it's very difficult to gauge how big it is. During the day, though, as you're walking up to it, it is very imposing. And the theater is actually a little smaller than the outside shell. And during the day, you can kind of see sunlight through some of the architecture. And so it looks very, very kind of industrial, very, very science fiction-y. As you get even closer, it is a giant building. Not only is it very tall, but it's, very, very wide, and it's perfectly spherical. So it's very weird looking, very alien. As you get even closer, you realize that these pixels are each about this big, and they're spaced out, a foot and a half or so. And so from a distance, obviously that resolution looks great to the eye. But when you're up close, it's mostly just steel and metal with these lights that are kind of just flickering. And you can't really tell what the image is when you're that close to it. So it's a very different look and feel. The event that I was going to see is a movie that's directed by Darren Aronofsky, and it's called Postcard from Earth. And it is a hour-long movie, and the idea is it's about a couple of astronauts that land on this far-off planet, and they come out of kind of like a cryosleep situation, and the computer starts talking to them and explains that it takes a while to wake up, and it takes a while to remember. And so the computer starts telling them, you are from Earth. And it begins at the beginning and starts going through the history of the planet and how life emerged and evolved. And then humans came along, and then we built societies. And it eventually gets into kind of a little bit of a post-apocalyptic sort of situation where we endanger the planet. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's very, very good. Initially, when you get to the Sphere, you walk in up these steps and you get in this pretty big line, and everybody's just kind of hanging out. And then at a certain time, they open the doors and you go through and scan your tickets, go through the metal detectors, all of that. It moves pretty quick. It was a giant line, very wide, very long, but things happen pretty fast. And once you get inside, you are inside this atrium. And the atrium is very large. You can see the escalators kind of going up to the different floors. And it's very shiny and very neon, felt very futuristic and very sci-fi feeling. There's kind of like these holographic images in the air, and there's these robots hanging out talking about the technology of the sphere. The robots were a little unnerving and kind of that uncanny valley humanoid look. They were very smart. They understood faces and voices, and they could have conversations with people. And then some of them, like I was saying, were demonstrating some of the technology that happens in the sphere. One of the first really big wow moments was this audio demonstration. So they had this wall of speakers that are the speakers that are inside the theater. And they explained that they can use noise cancellation and beamforming technology to determine what each seat hears. And so what they did is they projected these lights on the ground, these strips of light. So 4 stripes about 6 foot apart. And they said they were going to play a song. And depending on which line you stood on, you would hear different instruments. So the song starts, and if you stand here, you hear a piano. But you take a couple steps this way, the piano is gone, and now you hear a guitar. So the audio was incredibly precise. And that was one thing once I got inside that was really mind blowing as well, as just how the sound was in this gigantic space. Anyway, after you get your refreshments and then you visit some of the robots, we start to go into the theater and you get your seat. I had pretty good seats. I was right on an edge of a section. So I wasn't in the very best section, but I was on the edge of the next best section. You want to be as central as you can just because it is a spherical screen. Yes, if you get to the edge, you get more distortion, although I hear most of the seats are pretty good. So I was upper level, pretty central, and it is very steep. There were some times where I'd watch people walk up and down the stairs, some women in high heels and things like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you slip, you are in a world of hurt. It is steeper than most stadiums, I think. The people in front of me, their heads, top of their heads were kind of in line with my knees. So, yeah, a very, very steep theater. If you're not good with heights and things like that, you get a little bit of that kind of vertigo because it is such an enormous space. You feel really wide open and kind of unsupported. And it's very peculiar because this space is just so enormous. It's not a thing you get to see very often. Apparently, the building is big enough that you could put the Statue of Liberty inside of it, or Big Ben would fit inside that space. So, again, this just enormous volume. When the movie starts, they projected it onto an area about this big. So it felt like a big theater. And then they get to a part of the movie where it's a black screen with the planet Earth. We kind of do this slow zoom in. And at this point, they sort of keep zooming in and keep zooming in. And it's not 3D, but it is really high fidelity where it felt like you were going to get squished, like it was right there and just bigger than you can imagine. That's kind of the rub of it, is there's just no way to take good pictures or video because it is everywhere. It is the whole place. When they show you a scene where it's daytime and the sun is out, if you look at a person sitting next to you, it looked like you were outside during the day. It was that bright and that clear. It was absolutely immersive and all encompassing. And then, like I was saying, the sound. Usually, when you go to a concert or something, it's loud, but the concert venue, has a certain amount of space, and you get a little bit of reverb or delay from the speakers reaching you and that sort of thing. In the Sphere, it was like you were wearing headphones almost, or like the speaker was right in front of you. The stereo spread and everything was great, but it was just absolutely pristine sound and very loud. Not only bassy, but just in sheer volume. There was a couple times my Apple Watch was like, it's a little loud in here. Like I said, the movie was very impressive, very good. And I was way, way more impressed with the whole experience than I thought I was going to be. The other thing I did of note is I went and I saw a show called Absinthe. Absinthe takes place in a little circus tent. They call it a Spiegel tent that sits in front of Caesar's Palace, which is right across the street from the Flamingo. Absinthe, I think, has been running for just over 10 years. It started on the East Coast and then came to Las Vegas. And the company, Spiegelworld, has really kind of expanded and kind of taken over a little bit. The show Absinthe is sort of a comedy, vaudeville, circusy sort of thing. I would describe it as adjacent to Cirque du Soleil, some of the same sort of skill and performance, but much, much more adult and silly and crass. During the show, there's a master of ceremonies that they call the gazillionaire, and he is just the rudest, foulest MC that has ever hosted a show. Just makes fun of the audience and makes these really crude jokes. Everybody was laughing, of course, but it was very, very fun and different. The tent itself is not very big. I would say there might have been a couple of hundred people in there. There wasn't really a bad seat. And because I went on kind of an off month on an off day, there were a few open seats. And was given the opportunity to move forward a little bit by one of the staff there. But like I was saying, the Spiegelworld company has sort of taken over a little bit. Not only do they have Absinthe, but they have a couple of other shows on the strip. One that is more Western focused and one that's a little bit more 70s disco inspired. And then besides the shows, they also do restaurants. So Absinthe takes place at a area called the Green Fairy Garden. So you walk into this kind of green space with these lit up trees and that sort of thing. And there's places to get drinks. There's a burger place called No Pants Burger that's one of the best burgers on the strip. And they give you little tater tots that are star shaped. There is a little speakeasy area that you can kind of find. It's not real difficult to find, but it's not really marked. And it is the yacht club where it looks kind of nautical themed and they have a little area to sit and get drinks, that sort of thing. Disco show, they have a place called Diner Ross that's sort of like diner food, but much, much more upscale and elevated. The menu looked really good. I didn't get a chance to go check it out. And you don't have to have tickets to the show to go eat at these places. You can go and eat without seeing the show. One place I did go was a restaurant called Super Frico. It is an Italian restaurant in the Cosmopolitan that is done by Spiegelworld. Very, very psychedelic. Pictures of David Bowie and Nick Cave on the wall. And a lot of Italian food. I had pizza that had honey and jalapenos on it, which was really decadent and really good. Their cocktails are fantastic. And then because it is a Spiegelworld place, of course, somebody jumps up on a table and does some sort of act. So I saw a guy who did some juggling and that kind of thing, and it was very fun. So last thing I did on a whim is I stopped by a place called the Art Museum, art spelled with an E. And this is an installation of digital and projection-based art. I'd seen some similar things in other places. This place, very, very dedicated to it. It's kind of their primary thing. And there were a couple of versions or implementations that were pretty original and one that was really, really moving and great. Some of the spaces were just very large and then mirrored, so they seemed infinitely expansive. And then they would project something, which of course gets mirrored, and it just looked very, very surreal, very dreamlike. There was one thing where you could make a drawing and then scan the drawing, and the drawing would walk along this little jungle with these other drawing animals. And it was very cool and very kind of original. And then there was another space that was very large, and the projections were not only on the walls, but also some different shaped objects and the floor. And it was these kind of 15-minute themed displays. One of them had to do with European art, one had to do with Vegas specifically, and then one was Japanese that was originally shown in Japan, and then they brought it to Las Vegas for this space. And it was very, very well done. Really, really cool. The thing that's cool about Vegas is you can get there cheap. Like I said, I found a Black Friday deal where I got 3 nights with hotel and plane tickets for about $300. I think I spent more on food and entertainment than I did on my hotel and plane. So, yeah, that was pretty much my trip to Vegas. I really encourage you to not write it off. It's really easy to just go, that's a place for drinking and gambling. But there's really, really so much more. And like I said, it's always changing, always evolving. And there's just a lot of neat stuff to see there. I often plan a couple of big trips a year, but the Vegas stuff is often just kind of a whim. It's like, oh, that's a really great deal, and it would be nice to get away for a couple of days. I went in February, so it was about 50, 60 degrees the whole time. It did rain on my last day there as I was heading to the airport. I've never seen rain in Vegas, so that was a fun and interesting thing. But yeah, the weather was not hot, gross hot, not sit by the pool hot. And I went during the week, so it wasn't especially busy. There were a couple of conventions there, so there were people and a little bit of hubbub, but it wasn't like spring break or summer vacation. It was a really good time to go. So if you have any questions or good stories about Vegas, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.